Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips, which is sponsored by Wellness Forum Health, the Wellness Forum Institute, and Make Americans Free Again. So, first thing, I'm taking applications to start a local food over medicine club or a Make Americans Free Again tribe, or both. They're somewhat compatible. We are building an informed society. And informed, by that I mean informed about health, informed about medicine, informed about the legalities of health and medicine. So to have an informed society, you have to get people together in the same room to enjoy health information, enjoy good food, and then to learn about the legalities of this whole mess, which I'm going to illuminate a little bit in my video today, why you need to know this stuff. Anyway, if you're interested in those things, send me an email. The other thing is, if you're not a member of Wellness Forum yet, if you're not a member, you lapsed a long time ago, or you've never been a member, we want you back if you lapsed. We want you in if you're new, and we will give you a gift card equal to the amount of dues you pay, which you can then put toward things like our upcoming Food Over Medicine retreat in May, during which we're going to cover a lot of great things: the great protein debate, omega-3 supplements, vitamin C, magnesium, topics you've been asking about, like irritable bowel and gluten and glyphosate and inflammation and SIBO, and a special session I've scheduled for Sunday night of this weekend. It's May 3rd and 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. We're going to have a planning session where you take all the stuff you learned and then you put it together into some kind of action plan, what you're going to do about it. We did this last year. I impromptu scheduled the Sunday night session, but this year I plan to make it a part of it because I thought it worked out so well last year. And then, of course, our Cancer Summit was amazing, and you can purchase access to that or use your membership points toward it as well. All right, so two big news items, and the first one is a very interesting decision from the North Carolina Supreme Court that will probably help some of our cases. So here's the background of the story. In August 2021, Western Guilford High School in North Carolina notified football players and parents that there had been a cluster of COVID cases among team members. And if you remember back at the time, there was just constant hysteria. Subsequently, all the team activities were suspended, and players were either required to be tested for COVID-19 or get medical clearance from a health professional before returning to practice. The school actually provided a list of 3 locations where players could be tested, and one of those was a testing and vaccination clinic hosted by the school in partnership with the Old North State Medical Society. The letter sent to players and their parents stated that the school clinic offered COVID-19 tests. It didn't say anything about the vaccines, but it did state that the school clinic required students to bring a signed parental consent form before a student could be vaccinated. That was inherent in the policy. A few days later, football player Tanner Smith's stepfather drove him to the school clinic just to be tested. Smith did not want to be vaccinated. He didn't bring a signed consent form and was unaware that vaccines were even going to be offered there until he got there that day. Clinic workers actually tried to call Tanner's mother on the phone. She didn't answer the phone, so she couldn't have given consent to vaccinate her son. And one of the healthcare workers told another one, quote, "Give it to him anyway." The workers made no effort to go out to the parking lot or talk to Smith's stepfather, who was waiting outside for him to come out. Ignoring additional protests from Tanner himself, who insisted he did not want to be vaccinated, the workers forcibly injected him with the first dose of the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. So Tanner's family sued the local school board and the medical institution for battery and violations of their state and federal constitutional rights. Of course, the defendants claim that their actions were covered by the PrEP Act and moved to have the lawsuit dismissed. Isn't everything covered by the PrEP Act, right? The trial court agreed and dismissed the case. The appellate court upheld that decision. So it went to the Supreme Court in North Carolina, which found in favor of Tanner Smith and his mother. I'm going to give you just a couple of highlights from the decision because I think that it has a lot of bearing on at least one of our cases, maybe several. The court agreed that the state constitution protects a parent's right to control her child's upbringing, which includes the right to make medical decisions for a minor child. And this is a direct quote. "Indeed, the constitutional right to full custody and control over one's minor or children would ring hollow if it didn't include the right to consent on the child's behalf, as well as the right to seek a constitutional remedy when the state disregards the absence of that consent. The court added that as long as the parent is adequately caring for his or her children, there's no reason for the state to inject itself into that situation. The court also upheld the right to bodily integrity, which is defined as the right of a competent person to refuse forced, non-mandatory medical treatment. This is in alignment with the Supreme Court's understanding of bodily integrity, and cases were cited in which the right to refuse medical treatment was upheld. The court further wrote, quote, even the touching of one person by another without legal justification is defined as battery. The court pointed out that there was no mandate, and the case was about the right to refuse an unwanted, non-mandatory medical touching, which in this case just happened to be a vaccine. This is super important for our main case, the Harrington case, which is going to the United States Supreme Court as I'm filming this here. For those of you who are new to watching my videos, I'll just give you a quick summary. A COVID-19 vaccine clinic was held at a Maine elementary school. Parents were notified that a parental consent form was required for their kids to get the vaccine. Parents were sent a text the day before reminding them that, hey, if we don't have a consent form, we can't vaccinate your child. I think the perspective was, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of it, right? The parents of a child who attended school there had already decided that none of their 3 children would receive the COVID vaccine after being asked repeatedly by the family pediatrician. This is a really important point. Yet their grade school age child came home with a bandage on his arm after getting the vaccine anyway. And what made this so super egregious is the doctor who ran the in-school clinic and gave the injection was the family pediatrician who had been repeatedly told no. I guess a word that doctors who are really enthusiastic about vaccines just don't seem to understand. It's our goal to make them understand through the courts. No means no, and no permission slip means no vaccine. The fact that a parent isn't standing there to object doesn't negate parental authority. And if we don't pursue this, the law of the land will be that your kids are really not your kids. They belong to the state and the medical profession, and we've seen how well that all works out. It worked particularly well in Nazi Germany, too. So these cases, like the one I'm talking about, they're expensive, they're time consuming, and to finish them costs money. So I'm always asking you for money, and I'm always saying thank you for sending it, because we can't do this. I mean, I wish I was a rich person. I would just pay for all of it. Unfortunately, I don't have the lucky inheritance genes, so I have to ask you guys to help out too. So thank you so much in advance for supporting us and supporting this case. Now, the second story I want to share with you, or news item I want to share with you, is vaccine related. And this particular story was made public by Cheryl Atkinson, a great investigative reporter, and it has to do with the MMR vaccine. I don't find it surprising or shocking, but I think that you might, and I hope that you're all appalled. I am appalled by it. I hope you are too, and I hope that you feel a lot of compulsion to help us fix this. Okay, so Stephen Crawling was an experienced and well-published vaccine researcher and virologist who was hired by Merck in 1999. At the time that he was hired, Merck was dealing with a crisis, which was the potential recall of its billion-dollar MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella, because it might be defective. The consequences could have been catastrophic, involving the notification of millions of parents whose kids were given the vaccine. So you've got a catastrophic economic impact, but you also have a catastrophic problem in that vaccine hesitancy. That's the bane of the existence of the drug companies and vaccine makers and public health people. So some background on the story. The MMR vaccine contains 3 live viruses. In the 1970s and 80s, there were a lot of outbreaks of measles, mumps, and rubella in vaccinated children and young adults. Now, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago and offered to send any of you that asked me for it the very long article I wrote about these measles outbreaks that have been going on for decades. So in 1985, 69 measles cases at an Illinois high school with a 99.7% vaccination rate drew national attention. So the CDC fixed it by saying all kids need a second dose. Well, in the mid-1990s, the FDA started a review of vaccines, and found that the potency of the MMR vaccine eventually wore off if it sat on the shelf too long. So in response, the FDA instructed Merck to put more virus into the vaccine, which it does and continues to do to this day. The term for this is overfill, but the problem with it is if a child's given a vaccine from the fresh batch that hasn't sat on the shelf for a long time, that child gets extremely high amounts of these three viruses, and that poses a safety risk. But even with the overfilling, Crawling, the guy who went to work for Merck, said that the mumps virus was still dying off too fast. So Merck decided to launch an internal study called Protocol 7, which aimed to show that MMR vaccines still worked even with less mumps virus. So Merck wouldn't have to recall the millions of doses already out there. Crawling was assigned to Protocol 7, but he says no matter what he and his fellow Merck scientists tried, they just couldn't make the vaccine with less mumps virus stand up to FDA standards. The big shocker came when Crawling said a Merck lab official started telling them to just change the data to make it look better and destroy any documents that showed the real data. Now, the term for this is falsifying documents, and it's against the law. Crawling said he and 5 of his colleagues refused, and then he subsequently reported this to the FDA in 2001. So while Crawling was waiting to hear back from the FDA, he had a meeting with a high-level Merck executive and asked for scientific justification for this behavior. And the official said it's a business decision and it's none of your concern. Crawling was then told by someone in human resources that if he called the FDA, you're going to jail, meaning Crawling. So if you call the FDA about our misbehavior and illegal activity, you, the person reporting it, is going to jail. Well, the next day, Crawling came into the office and he witnessed massive destruction of viral plates and evidence. So he called the FDA to report this. The agency did conduct an inspection, which confirmed what Crawling reported and that raw data was being changed without any justification. Crawling said he was surprised the FDA, however, wasn't bothered by Merck's fraud, but Merck was clearly bothered, so they took him off the Protocol 7 team and he resigned. Well, in 2010, Crawling and another former Merck scientist filed a whistleblower lawsuit against Merck. They alleged the company misled the CDC, the largest purchaser of vaccines, and defrauded taxpayers by, quote, omitting, concealing, and misrepresenting material information regarding its mumps vaccines. Dr. David Kessler, a former head of FDA, testified as an expert witness in support of this case, and in 800 pages of testimony repeatedly stated that Merck and its MMR vaccine had been misleading. The vaccine was adulterated, and he raised the question if the mumps vaccine was really capable of preventing outbreaks and might have been responsible for the outbreaks. Well, the case took 14 years and was finally decided, and I hope you're sitting down. In the end, the court dismissed the case, stating that CDC knew about the allegations of fraud and potency and bought the vaccine anyway and continued to buy the vaccine, so there had been no fraud. You heard that right. They knew there was misbehavior. They bought the vaccines anyway with their eyes wide open, so there was no fraud. Meanwhile, mumps and measles outbreaks have continued, as I reported a couple of weeks ago. And you know what just makes my blood boil, and I hope it makes your blood boil too? Parents who don't vaccinate their children, or doctors or health professionals who speak out about risks associated with the vaccines, or anything wrong with them at all. We're all categorized as nut jobs, and our characters are assassinated with the help of the bought and paid for by pharma and very obedient media. And then the drug companies continue to threaten the personal safety of people they deem dangerous to their sales and profits. Well, if you don't like this, and I clearly don't, I think you can tell, help us do something about it. We're working on this from 2 angles. When I say we, Wellness Forum and Make Americans Free Again. One is for almost 30 years now through Wellness Forum, we've been helping patients and their families and training health providers to engage in informed medical decision-making where you know the truth about these things, whatever the consequences are to people like me, before you make a decision about anything ranging from a vaccine to major surgery to cancer treatment. And then through our nonprofit, we file lawsuits targeted at changing this miserable and highly unethical and illegal system. it just takes your breath away what these people get away with, and it takes your breath away how disconnected healthcare is to the needs of people today. So when you support us, either by buying things from Wellness Forum, joining Wellness Forum, or making donations to Make Americans Free Again, these are all steps in the direction of fixing this. I have a great vision of an informed society that controls its own healthcare. We're aggressively working on that right now. And if I stay alive and we stay in business long enough to get it done, both of which are highly likely, much to the distress of my critics, we're going to fix this. Before I leave the planet, we're going to fix it. So anyway, all this to say, we need your help. So support Wellness Forum, donations to Make Americans Free Again, and form tribes, food over medicine clubs. If you're a health professional, get trained in the informed method. It's the only way to practice where people know the risks and benefits of things before they take any action, instead of finding out the hard way when it doesn't work out so well. All right. You can donate to Make Americans Free Again online or send checks to our office. Buy merchandise. That helps us as well at makeamericansfreeagain.com. And happy to talk to any health professional who wants to join us in our program to reform healthcare. I think we have a much better chance of doing it than the federal government, which seems to be distracted by seed oils and nonsense right now. These are far more important issues that need to be addressed. All right, that's it for today. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it. And I will be back to you next week with more news. Thank you so much for watching.